Hey everybody, I'm Shaunti Feldhahn and I am a social researcher.
And I am Dr. MichaelSytsma. I'm a licensed professional counselor, certified sex therapist, and ordained pastor.
And we are the co-authors of this book, Secrets of Sex and Marriage.
And we're here to answer your questions. Why doesn't my spouse like sex?
I can see why that would be an important question. I was fascinated that one of the reasons people think my spouse doesn't like it, they're not interested, is that we have this perception that's basically from Hollywood. It's sort of a myth, and we don't realize it's a myth, of this concept of there's just one way that sex works. And that one way is what you see on the screen, which is that the guy and the girl look at each other and then there's this like spark, and there's this hunger, this feeling of desire, and pretty soon the clothes are off and they're in bed, right?
But often it's thought of that is being interested.
Right, that's what interested means.
Right,
is you
that
feel
I
it.
approach this already wanting, already thinking about it, already with a desire.
Right, and it turns out that there's actually not one primary type of desire, which is that one. You could call it initiating desire. Right. There's two primary types of desire, and the second type of desire is called receptive desire. You never see that on the screen. And yet receptive desire, we found, is 55% of the population have receptive desire.
The way I often will explain it in workshops or seminars is I put a slide of chocolate being melted and drizzled over a strawberry, and we talk about the rich decadence of chocolate and what it tastes like and what it smells like, and it's not very long before you see hunger. And I'll ask the group of people out there, how many of you would like chocolate right now? And almost everybody raises their hands. Who walked in the room thinking there's got to be chocolate in this building someplace? And there's always at least one or two that go.
That would be me.
That would be. Those are the initiating type of desire. They walked in thinking about it, wanting it. But everybody else is a receptive desire. They weren't thinking about it. And so we asked, do you tend to think about sex and then pursue it and get aroused? Or do you tend to get aroused and then the desire kicks in? And for women,
73% of women
are saying no. I tend to experience desire after I've already said yes and I began to get engaged in the process. And that's receptive desire. There needs to be, and this is for both men and women, but more commonly for women, also common for older men, that there has to be a decision to engage. And then awareness of what's going on in my body, and my body is getting turned on by this, and my heart's getting turned on, and I like these feelings. I like the sensations that I'm having in both my heart and my body. And it's not until all of those steps happen that the brain goes, oh, let's add desire to this. And so for some people, it's 3/4 of the way through the process before desire kicks in. That's receptive desire.
Now I'm going to ask everybody listening to this question. So what percentage do you think of couples have what we all would have probably thought was 100%, which is the husband and the wife both have initiating desire? What percentage of couples actually work that way?
When I ask this in classes, I'll start with, do you think more than 50%? And I'll get quite a few.
Yeah.
Do you think more than 30? And most people, do you think it's more than 15? And nobody gets it.
Nobody gets it. It turns out he actually crunched all the numbers because his brain is bigger than mine. It was very complicated. And the answer is
10%.
10% of couples.
So about 1 in 10, both of them are thinking,
Both the husband and wife.
hey, this would be a fun thing to do, and seek each other out.
And 90% have a different pattern. So if that's you, it may not be that your spouse doesn't like it or isn't interested. It may be that they just have a different type of desire.
And most of those couples, one spouse or the other, most commonly the husband had the initiating type of desire and the wife was more receptive.
Yeah.
And the invitation for those couples, sort it out, talk through what type of desire do you have, and then what helps you to engage, what helps you to experience it, and learn about how each other do work. So it's not just the belief that because you don't want sex the way I do means you don't want it, or because I don't want it the way
Exactly.
the society says I should means I don't. There are, though, a group of people that aren't interested, and they can be not interested, more the resistant desire, for a host of different reasons. And it could be past experience, it could be expectations that they have on themselves, it could be that they are just generally wired as a higher anxiety or a higher depressed type of an individual, and that disrupts the circuitry in our brain that helps us to want, to desire. So there may be a host of reasons. Many times people come in looking for the silver bullet that will change their spouse. And in the arena of sexuality, that doesn't tend to work very well because we're so complex. There are a host of things that keep our desire level in place. How do I get my spouse interested in sex? Very similar to the first
Very good follow-up.
But I like this twist because it moves from, the first one was, what's wrong with my spouse? This one is, what can I do? How can I help?
Yeah. What can I do and what can we do is the right way of asking that question.
We've got an entire chapter in the book that talks about curiosity.
Yes.
And the stance of being open, not of what's wrong with you and how do we change you, but what's going on here? And you like this story, so I'll go ahead and tell it.
Yes, please tell the story.
Of couples that come in and sit down, and I look at them and I say, so if it were totally up to you, how often would you like to engage sexually with your spouse? What would you feel good about? It's all over the board, but the most common answer I'll get from wives is 1 to 2 times a week, and the most common answer I'll get from husbands is 2 to 3 times a week. And I look at them and say, guys, there's not much difference between 2 and 2. You're not as far apart as what you think you are. And they believe that they're further apart, but what happens next is really cool, because the higher desire spouse, whether it's the husband or the wife, goes, wait, what? You want it how often? And the follow-up question is, if you want it that often, if you want it 1 to 2 times a week, we're not having it that often. Why aren't we having it that often? And I like to interrupt and say, that's the right shift. To go from what's wrong with you that we don't, to what's wrong in this setting. If you're wanting more than we're getting and I want more than what we're getting.
What are the reasons?
Yeah,
Exactly.
And I watch them move from being in opposition to each other, something's wrong with you and I have to defend that there's not, to being on the same side of the table going, we have a shared vision of twice a week. That isn't happening. Maybe you'd like it a little bit more than twice a week. Maybe I'd like it a little bit less than, but we can agree on twice a week. What's getting in the way? And now couples start to talk about it. And now this question can actually get answered as one of them says, I'm just too wore out.
Right.
I'm way too tired. And now we can step in and let's do energy management.
One of the things that we saw in the data really helps connect people to the real answer instead of the mythical answer. Mm-hmm. Because the mythical answer that everybody thinks is that if one person wants more kind of connection, more intimacy, more frequency than the other, and there's this gap, you assume that the reason is, well, this person just has a lower sex drive. Often, one of the reasons is that actually 2 of you have 2 different types of desire, mm-hmm. and you have to work with that rather than wishing it was different. Right. If your spouse is more the receptive desire type, then one of the solutions, not the only, but one of the solutions, when you put yourself on the same side of the table, might be to say, well, what do you need to be thinking about it?
I use controversial language for this. We won't have time to totally unpack it, but I like the word seduce. What does it take for me to draw you, to seduce you?
He's not talking about twirling a mustache and seducing somebody, no.
Because the thinking is when we start dating, we put our best self forward. We are always drawing you, or wooing you, or getting you to like us. And that's what I talk about as seduction. I'm drawing you in.
It's living seductively.
Very much so. It's not doing something seductive that you think is seductive. It's not taking control over somebody else. Nobody can seduce us if we don't allow them to. It is being in this, living in such a way that you look over and go, wow, I like who you are. And this question gets right to that core. The question, how do I get my spouse interested in sex? Well, what kind of a person do I need to be that you would want to engage with me? That you've been gone all day at work and you come home and just expect me to be ready. I might not work that way. I might need you to come in and sit down and have a cup of tea with me and really ask me about how my day went. I might need more affirmation and, that you really like me in order for me to want to engage. I hear a host of different answers from couples when we start talking about what draws you, what gets you into the space that you're thinking, I want to go play with you. And that is going to be individual to each different couple, each spouse.
One of the things that I found very interesting in the research and in these nationally representative surveys that we did is that it works the same way with men as with women if they are that receptive spouse. Like, I talked to many men who had more of that receptive desire. You pointed out that often as men get older, they may have more of that receptive desire. And there's this sense of, being able to hear you say, thank you so much for taking the kids and doing these things with them, or thank you for working so hard to provide for the family, or whatever it is, and to feel that sense of, oh wow, she appreciates me.
Right.
That enters them into that space where they can then make that decision,
right.
As opposed to, why did you get home so late again? That may not end up being what you're going for.
And there's a lot more that we could probably say on this subject.
Oh my gosh, and we have more questions to cover. So if this content was helpful for you, we really encourage you to look at our book, Secrets of Sex and Marriage, and to look at the links in the description below. If this was a helpful video, please subscribe.